Today, we welcome on episode 107 of the Athletes Podcast, Erika Fiedler. Thank you for joining the show. Canadian pole vaulter heading towards the 2024 Olympics. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited for this conversation. We were introduced via Craig. The guy's a stud. We were doing some bachata lessons last week, and he's like, man, I know a pole vaulter that would love to come on your pod. So I thought it was a great opportunity to share a unique sport, something that, people aren't necessarily getting into on a regular basis. Do you want to maybe explain a bit about who you are, what you do, how you got into this crazy sport?
Sure. Pole vault, I have to say, is a completely niche sport. So you're right. You don't usually walk down the street, meet too many pole vaulters. I started in high school. We had a track and field team. Literally, they said, hey, we're also adding pole vault into the docket. And I was like, well, I've seen that on television. I was the kind of kid that would try anything. And so I said, kind of sign me up. And so we had a coach that he was pretty new to it. And he had been doing it a little bit when he was a kid. And so he coached us a little bit. But you only do it like 2 months of the year. And so it wasn't till I was 18 and went off to university that I started training competitively for the University of Guelph, went through the collegiate system, and now I'm training post-collegiate, hoping for the Olympics, 2024, which isn't that far away.
No, it's really not, especially when your last Olympics happens in 2021. I mean, a little 3-year gap there. Take us through kind of taking on this head first. Like, obviously, you've got some adrenaline junkie in you. You like to try new things, get after it. Like, what were the learnings quickly that came from pole vaulting and the uniqueness that is possessed by that sport?
Oh man, it's such a puzzle. I think my problem is, you have so much, right? Adrenaline. I love the sport. I try very hard at it, but sometimes when you're a kid, you're just like, I want to do this so bad, and I'll just run as fast as I can and go for it. It's something that you have to build up towards. And it's a very technical sport. So you work on aspects of it and you build your way up to, like, for example, a long run. You only are on a long run for a short period of time. So it's the kind of thing that you start on a short run, you do a ton of drills, and eventually you get better and better and better over the years. But it's something that they kind of say the 10,000 hour rule. It really holds true. It takes like 10 years to make a pole vaulter.
Really? And I can only imagine. I mean, most people aren't flexing what is it, a carbon stick, or they carbon, what's the stick? Is that I'm probably not using the right lingo either, like the pole.
You're pretty close. Yeah, the
we're gonna use the pole.
You're good.
So what's the pole made out of? What's the force that you're generating? Like, give us some physics data here that I'd love to kind of dive into.
You're tapping into my engineering, which I don't know if I've ever calculated that, but you use a carbon fiber pole, and so there's either carbon composite, or fiberglass. So there's sort of 3 hybrid or types that are used right now commonly. And you use a pole to jump over the bar. So the more speed you bring into it, like E equals MC squared, whatever speed you can bring in, the higher you're going to jump. So that's the kind of point of pole vault, is to generate energy.
Right. And what are you doing to train for that? Obviously, like, you can get your sprints in, but you've got a new variable here, carrying a 10, 12 foot length pole by your side that you're using to get yourself up there. Like, what's involved in that movement? Because it's very unique. Like, not many people are throwing themselves over another pole using one pole. Like, it would be tough to describe to someone if they'd never seen the sport.
Well, I remember I went to a meet once, and there were these high school kids, and they were kind of asking me, like, oh, at what point do you go from high jump to pole vault? And I kind of laughed for a second. I was like, oh yeah, well, I do need assistance to jump. That's true. I need a stick. But they're actually 2 different events. And so, yeah, you use a stick to go over another bar. For me, the bigger pole, the better, the higher you're going to jump. So I'm fairly tall. I'm 6'2", and working on speed, I wouldn't say it's one of my fortes, but I'm on about 14 and a half foot poles. Some of the other elite women are on even as big as 15. That's kind of pretty close to where we cap out as women so far. Maybe somebody will go higher on that. And the men could be on like 16, 17, 18. They can get on some really, really big sticks.
Wow. Okay. And, I'm trying to just put myself in those shoes. I'm running with a 15-foot pole by my side. I'm hucking that into the ground. Like, what's it like throwing yourself up in the air and hoping that you can get over that bar and not, like, have it puncture you on the way down? Like, there's so many different areas. I can't even imagine the stress every time you have to go and do that. Obviously, it comes with the 10,000 hours of practice.
Well, I will say, don't look up the pole vault fail videos if you don't want to see some really tough stuff there. I do
Yeah.
not watch those the week of a competition. I don't want to see any of that jazz, but it's just thrilling. That's the one word I'd use for it. You're running as fast as you can, but in control. You plant the pole high above your head, jump into your hands, swing, and then you do sort of a gymnastics maneuver where your legs go up, turn, and you pike over top of the bar while throwing the pole and trying not to hit the bar on your way down. And it's kind of that free fall position. That's my favorite. You know, when you've cleared it, you've done it. It's just thrilling. It's fun. It's freeing.
Yeah, almost euphoric is the way
Yeah.
I would describe that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
free fall afterwards. Not that I've ever experienced it, nor something that I ever think I will experience, just from my lack of gracefulness up in the air. We'll
Hey,
call it.
come on out. We're always
Uh,
recruiting.
yeah, I know. I tried a javelin in grade 12, and I almost made provincials, but that was just pure athleticism and no training. How does a coach who joins the same year as you at high school end up teaching you and eventually like bringing you to these new heights? Like, was it something that you guys worked on together collaboratively? Like, I'm always curious, high school level, it's a very unique time for kids. I say kids, young adults who are going through training, whether it's getting bigger, stronger, there's so many different variables that come along with that. But, when you get to that point, does that coach say, hey, this is an opportunity for you to, go to the Olympics? Or what motivates you at that point and gives him the gumption that, hey, this is going to be worthwhile long term?
Yeah, I mean, in high school, it was just for fun. He started coaching, and I mean, those are formative years. I thought I knew what it was. And I remember I jumped 2 meters or 2 meters 80. And then that coach actually went on a year sabbatical. And so they kind of asked me to help coach. And I mean, whoever put a 17-year-old in charge of a pole vault program, I'm not sure that was our best move. I don't know how good we all got that year, but it was definitely fun. And so I coached a couple of other young adults at that time. More of us kind of grew that group. But I didn't get a lot better because there was no new information coming to me at that point. I was coaching it myself, and I didn't have a lot of information. Like, there wasn't the same amount of YouTube videos and information out there. So I would say we were just kind of like playing around and having fun for those 2 months of the year. And then I met a coach who actually coaches in town at another high school. I met him, and then he was a university coach. So he kind of recruited me and found out I was going to the University of Guelph, found out that I was going there for engineering and that I was kind of interested in continuing to train. And so he said, hey, come on out, see if you like it, if you have fun. I came out, trained a little bit, he brought me to my first meet, and I PB'd by a good amount. I kind of kept going, and then I made, at that time it was called CIS, now called Youth Sports. Yeah. And from there, it just kind of snowballed. It was great. So a lot of fun from there.
Yeah, University of Guelph, I didn't know they were known for their pole vaulting abilities. Was there opportunities to go down south, go below the 49th parallel, play NCAA? Like, was that a topic? I know this is something that we bring up all the time with the athletes we showcase. Like, a lot of them have that opportunity to go down south, whether it's for better education, better athletics, whatever the case may be. Was that a factor for you?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I wasn't good enough in high school to warrant a scholarship. I was just kind of doing it for fun. I chose the University of Guelph because they were one of 2 universities that had a biological engineering program at the time. So that was why I chose to go there. And it wasn't until university that I got good enough that maybe it would have warranted a scholarship down in the US. So there's a ton of great universities down south that have fabulous pole vault and track and field programs. So you can kind of choose from there. But Guelph is known for their track and field program. They've won numerous national titles, and so they're very known in the track and field world.
Yeah, I knew they were track and field. I guess pole vaulting's one that I got to brush up on my information, make sure. Jordan actually just messaged me this fun fact. He was talking about how pole vaulting dates back to the 16th century, when poles were actually used to pass over natural obstacles in the Netherlands and across other areas in the UK. Yeah. And in fact, historians have found paintings depicting this sporting activity back to around 500 BC, began with ancient Greeks vaulting over bulls to avoid confrontation.
Wow. Well, I did not know that. So that's news to me, but that's pretty cool.
This is why you come to the Athletes Podcast, a fresh new fact every day. Could you imagine pole vaulting over bulls? Is that something that you would do?
Man, I need all the maths that there are. I don't know if I could do it back that far when they were just going over and landing on rocks.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys have the fortunate, it is fortunate that there are mats down there. It would not be comfortable afterwards. But was there talks, like obviously you go through a training at Guelph where track and field is a high priority? Were there options to go and train for other sports? You played everything in high school. Like, did you consider joining other aspects of that track and field, or was pole vaulting just your calling right away from the beginning?
Well, I mean, I was a bit of a keener. So when I went off to university, I was actually trying out for the swim team and I made the swim team. And so pole vault was just kind of like a hobby. I was like, oh, I'll go out once or twice a week. I'll keep that up for fun because I always enjoyed it. And then I got pretty good at pole vault. And so they said, hey, like you've made nationals, like you got to train full time here. And so after the first year, I actually had to switch from the swim team to the track team. And then, I mean, you're training in a lot of different aspects. You're doing sprints, weights, you're doing plyometrics, jumping, all of these different things, sometimes gymnastics training as well to help you become a better vaulter. So I didn't compete in other events per se, but it's definitely an option on the team. If you have, the talent in another event and you want to train for it, you absolutely can.
Yeah, and that's it's such an interesting note because I think athletes are starting so young trying to specialize in one sport now when in reality there's so many options. And then you look at like the decathlon and what that comes with and how you're able to pursue so many different sports. I don't know, to me I just like keeping doors open, the same way with personal and professional life. I think leaving as many doors open as possible is very beneficial, long term, short term, whatever the case may be. In June 2021 you hit 4.15 meters. What's the large or biggest number you're trying to get to? Like, have you been ever nervous when you're getting up to that height, like when you're going for those new goals, PBs? Like, I'm sure that there's some times where it gets a little nerve-wracking when you're like, I don't know if they're gonna make this, but like what's the thought process then?
Well, it's a tough sport because you know what? It's one of those few sports that you go till failure. Like you're
Hmm.
going through that and you're trying to get better and better every jump. So each jump you're trying to go higher, you're getting on bigger steps with so either longer or higher flex numbers. And so it's getting harder for you until you get 3 attempts and eventually you're not able to clear the bar. So mentally it can be very taxing, but it's something that you work on mentally to kind of have a positive attitude, to visualize, to think about what you're doing. And then you're trying to put yourself in that position as many times as possible to PB. And then when you have those good conditions and that good day, it comes together.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. Like the conditions are a huge factor. Obviously, sometimes indoors, sometimes competing outdoors. Do you have a preference? Is there a specific climate that you like best? And like second follow up to that would be like, where's the most amazing, beautiful place that you've competed because you've been all around the world?
Oh man, that's so tough. I love competing in Europe. I've been fortunate enough to go over there a couple of times. One of my favorite meets is in Joachim, Germany. It's a small little town, and they were just so passionate about pole vault. It was amazing. I remember going there, and the meet director was like, "Yeah, this is our 27th year hosting it, and this was 3 years ago in 2018." And I kind of said, "Oh, like, are you guys a track club?" And he goes, "No, no, we're a soccer club. We just love pole vault." And so they had just put a pit in and they just invited athletes from around the world. And that year, we actually had the highest jump on earth for that year, like the world lead. And that was so fun to compete there, to watch it, to just experience the entire thing. I think the town, like, I don't know how many thousand people were there, but they sold 2,000 tickets in this small little town for pole vault.
Wow.
People are having beers and drinking wine and they're playing music and cheering you on. And it was just, it's the atmosphere that gets me. That was like the most fun I've had pole vaulting. There was no stress that day.
That's amazing. It sounds like, yeah, the Germans know how to do it. I mean, anytime there's beer included, I think that's a benefit. But what's, I mean, that was a question I had. Like, you're going through, this is a very individual sport. You're on quote unquote stage coming up and performing. Everyone's got eyes on you as you go up. What are some methods that you use to stay calm, get into your rhythm, your routine, and avoid the stress, the anxiety that comes from having all eyes on you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the repetition of it. I mean, you train for the sport every day and you just kind of got to treat it like any other day. So you get on the runway, you go through the routine of your warm up, you visualize what you're going to do, and then you just treat it like any day of the week and try to keep your nerves down and breathe. But For me, I don't get too nervous about crowds. I actually like more people. I mean, the last 2 years of COVID, not really being able to have those meets, and the few that we did was just like,
Mm-hmm.
coach, the official, and the two other people in there. Like, it was very low key. And so that was hard to kind of get yourself activated and excited versus, being in Europe or in the US where there's lots of people cheering you on, clapping, music, just the atmosphere. So I definitely miss that. I love that kind of feeling you get when there's people there and they're passionate, they're excited, and they're there to watch you, which is really fun. So you kind of put on a show.
Yeah, anytime you can get that adrenaline running, I think I mean, it's a natural body reaction. Is it a hormone? Is adrenaline a hormone? Anyway, whatever the case, either way, it gets you going. Same way caffeine, any other substance is, right? So, if it can help you give you that extra 1-2% on your performance, then you got to take that and run with it because, at the end of the day, that might be the difference between winning gold and silver, which you're no stranger to. Gold, I mean, at Silverston Invitational in Michigan University, Classique de Montreal, Andy Higgins Classic, vertical jumps in by pole vault, HP standards, me, like you name it, you've basically placed gold. How do you continue to win and at the same time ensure that you keep confidence and level headed as you continue to pursue the Olympics as that end goal?
I mean, for me, those meets are fun to go to, but those meets are usually the goal of achieving certain heights. And when you're going for those heights, you don't care so much how you place until they're really big meets, obviously, like the Olympics and Worlds and Diamond League and some of those really big meets that we're all gunning for. Then it really matters that you perform and, you're trying to medal. And obviously the ultimate goal is gold. But for me, those other meets, it's trying to get the standards and jump as high as I can so I can get invited to those other meets. That's the key factor. And at the beginning of the season, like right now, I'm still on short run. So we'll be having kind of maybe one meet in December and then start in January. I'll still be on short run. So you're not going to jump as high. You're just kind of working on technical things, getting comfortable and working your way back to where you're going to be for the outdoor season in May and June.
Gotcha. What does the selection process look like? Like, is it, you just said there to qualify for those meets? Like, are you having to hit a certain level to be able to get invited to the Olympics, or like, is it based on country? Like, break that down, kind of qualifying how to get in to represent your country at the biggest stage.
Yeah, it's gotten a little bit more complicated. A couple years ago, it used to be, hey, hit that standard, be in the top 3, you get to go. They've changed it a little bit based on a point system. So now I think it's your top 5 within that year. And there's certain points for it being done at higher caliber meets. So for example, a Diamond League, and they sort of have a multiplication factor. So there is like a world ranking system that we work ourselves on. And when you can only take 3 people per country to the Olympics, and you have to be in the top 32. So that's where it kind of narrows it down. Top 32 in the world when they're only taking 3 per country.
Gotcha. Okay. So a lot of thought going into which meets you're attending, how you're going to perform at each one, visualizing that. Like, how do you have the time to work full time, to train full time? Like, I'm just trying to think. I'm drowning myself doing, this little side extracurricular project. Like, you're doing this, trying to make the Olympics in 3 years. Like, take us through kind of what your day-to-day schedule looks like, how you continue to expand your knowledge and your abilities from an athletic standpoint.
I mean, it's not easy. I won't lie. It's not a walk in the park. It takes a lot of hard work and focus. I really do have to kind of compartmentalize my time and sometimes focus on my mindset of going from work to practice and kind of putting away the stresses and the things that I know I need to do for work, completely put them aside and focus on what am I doing right now. And it's not always perfect. Sometimes my warm-ups aren't long enough. Sometimes my cool downs aren't long enough. I've had to skip parts of workouts, but I try to focus on the most important things. I try to keep myself healthy, focused. And some days when you're just grinding, like I've worked till 10 p.m. and then just gone and at least try to get my run in or do something athletic, physical that day to keep my fitness up. I think the best thing you have to remind yourself is that it doesn't have to be perfect. I used to always think that in university. I was like, oh, I have to do this workout to a T. It has to hit the right times, the right weights, the right percentages. And sure, that's a good goal to have for those workouts. But in the end, just getting fit and getting out there and doing it is good every day too. I think we all learned that in COVID too, when you had to really change your workouts and stuff. I just learned that, I got out there today and I'm going to be okay with that some days.
Yeah, 100%. I think everyone's learned that just from a baseline health, kind of standpoint. You want to make sure that you're just getting, whether it's steps, whether it's a workout, whether it's, exercising with a significant other, you name it, like there's got to be something active throughout the day to keep you going and keep the brain right, the body right, everything. There's a lot that goes into it because people don't realize when, you get into a rut and you've gone a week or two without working out, how detrimental that can be in the groove. You're like, you become lazy and then it snowballs and then you haven't worked out in 3 months. Then you look like me. Like it's just not, no, I'm kidding. But like, where I see you kind of specializing here is obviously you majored in engineering, have a master's in biomedical engineering. So you're no dummy, to say the least. Have you applied kind of your book smarts and academic knowledge to sport and to athletics to say like, hey, these are the necessary steps that I need to take to get to this level, and kind of reverse engineered what you're trying to do?
I mean, you know what? You learn a lot in school, but the biggest thing you learn is how to learn.
Mm.
I enjoyed my engineering degree, but I think a lot of the things that I've learned have been through doing it. So going through pole vault as a career in university, I learned so much about training, about mental capacity, and just, coaches were so supportive. And so then you sort of build this base and go from there. I mean, in university, the one I loved anatomy. I took a full year anatomy course. It wasn't part of engineering. I remember I kind of heckled them for like 3 years to take it. They were like, that's for the biomed students. And I was like, listen, I really want to do it. And so after 3 years, they finally gave in and let me take the course. And so that was a fun year to just kind of like actually see the body the way it is, because you just don't have a comprehension of how the muscles are all attached. And so sort of putting some of the theoretical and school stuff together with how I'm feeling on a day-to-day basis, you learn a lot, but it's been putting it together.
Yeah, 100%. And I think obviously it's accumulation of everything that you've done in your past that's gotten you to this point, to where you are now. I mean, you mentioned training, you mentioned mental capacity. What's been kind of some integral pieces that you've added to the puzzle over the past couple of years that have really stepped your game up, allowed you to improve by 80 centimeters in university? Like what are some of those factors, variables that you've implemented?
Well, the better you get, the slower the progress in terms of improvement. Because, in the beginning, I think I jumped 280 in high school. And then, all of a sudden I improved 80 centimeters to 360. And you go from there. And then now I kind of small centimeter PBs because, it's harder to make those big gains when you're first learning. You make one improvement like that and you're like, oh, okay, now I got it. I just improved 20 centimeters. So that's the fun part of the sport in the beginning when you're seeing those initial successes. After that, you're having to put a lot more effort into making those small, minute changes and technical changes. Like sometimes you'll jump differently and better, but you jump at the same height. And so it doesn't always feel like a win. So sometimes you're really having to like kind of talk yourself through it. You're like, no, I did this better. I might not have jumped higher, but I did this better. And in the long term, that's going to get me to where I need to be. And so you're working on a lot of technical things. Like pole vault is a puzzle that you're always trying to put together, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like it for sure. What are some techniques, workouts that you wish you knew when you started? Like if you could rewind the clock, would you be doing hip thrusts? Would you be like doing lat pull downs, pull overs? Like what are you doing in the gym that's, allowed you to make this emphasis? If you were to tell like 12-year-old pole vaulter, hey, start getting familiar with these exercises, working on your mobility for your shoulder, like what are you doing if you could, rub that genie bottle and go back 10 years?
For me, I think it's like basic mobility. I think sometimes people focus on weights and sprints. And while that's obviously very important because they're the building blocks of where you're going to go, just learning general movements and aerospatial awareness is really, really key, especially for pole vault. The more you know where you are in the air, the easier it's going to be than if you're just completely lost, which does happen every once in a while. So yeah, just the mobility and general movements, learning technique and what positions and what things can you do outside of pole vault to get you in those positions so that you can do them when you vault. So we call this drill bupkas. And so you hang upside down on the bar, or you hang right side up and you lift your legs and you're going upside down. So lifting your hips. So that's a great drill. Just doing more drills when I was a little bit younger than trying to join later on probably would have been beneficial. I was a little bit late to the party. I started when I was 18, whereas a lot of people start a lot younger, but I figure I got more years ahead of me still.
Yeah, 100%. You're just refining your craft. Sometimes you're probably like just a bottle of wine, you got to let it sit, age a little, get better. Where's like long term? Obviously, you've got some incredible academic knowledge. A biomed engineering degree is going to open doors from you. Representing your country is going to open doors from you. Like 10, 12, 15, 30 years from now, what is Erika Fiedler doing? Do you have some goals post athlete life? Like what's the expectation? What are you hoping and striving for?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough question. I don't know. I think, you know what, one of my struggles is that I've never been able to nail that down.
Mm,
I have a passion for learning. I've always wanted to do so many things that it's hard to find and pick what you're going to try to fill your time with, because we have a finite amount of time.
hmm.
For me, I'd like to keep training a couple more years at the elite level and then move it a little bit more as a passion project. Like I wouldn't mind coaching.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to continue pole vaulting just as a masters athlete. I love seeing in Europe how there were a lot more masters competitions and stuff, and people kept active longer versus here. I think people, they do their competitive career and then they just kind of stop, which I think is a little bit sad. So I'm a strong proponent of moving as long as possible, because I think it's just healthier. The people that I see that continue to work out, they lead healthier lifestyles later on. So I choose to always be active. I want to go as long as I can. After that, just staying active for fun and then building my career on the other side of things too as an engineer. So
Nice. Yeah, I definitely think, the people that continue to move their body are the ones that are going to benefit long term. Obviously, this is something that you've learned along the way. Annika Newell is also probably a name that you know, but she's coming on in a couple of weeks on the show.
oh, cool.
So I'm excited. We're gonna have like back-to-back pole vaulters, like go 106 episodes without any, but then we throw
Hey,
a
we're
couple
taking
in.
over.
Say
That's what I
that's
like to see.
crazy. Hey, I gotta represent, make sure we showcase every single kind of athlete, and I think a lot of these sports, because they maybe don't get the glitz and the glam from TV, from being on a frequent basis. Like, you guys are some pretty incredible athletes that need to be showcased. So I'm glad we were able to share a bit about your story. And I see potentially you becoming a prof in some area. I think if you like to continue learning, you've obviously mastered the education game, going through being a TA, etc. Like, I see potentially prof in the future, but for right now, you're going to focus on continuing to put up some crazy numbers on the pole vault and represent our country. I love being able to feature Canadians. It's a favorite part of our gig here. Erika, I'd love for you to share. Obviously, you're doing what you love with the sport of pole vaulting. I'd love for you to share with our listeners, viewers, wherever they're consuming the Athletes Podcast content, what your biggest piece of advice would be to the next generation of athletes.
My best piece of advice would just be enjoy the time that you have in the sport, like have fun with it. Sometimes people take it really seriously. And I would just say, don't stress, make memories, because the times that I've shared, it's just been the journey, not necessarily hitting that number. It's just all the experiences that I've accumulated all over these years and that I will continue to experience. So have fun with it.
Love that. Love that. Erika, thank you so much for coming on the Athletes Podcast. Where can people find you on social media if they want to follow your journey?
Okay, you can find me at Pole Vault Erika, all one word, and Erika's spelt with a K.
She knows how to do it. I love it. Thank you so much, Erika. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.